Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and this time I've got something really exciting for you. I'm previewing some epic scale World of Tanks action straight from the sandbox test server. This is 30 versus 30 on a new map which they're calling Sunny Valley, and you might notice that the game mode looks a lot more familiar because to all intents and purposes it is exactly the same as the random queue of World of Tanks. You have a base, the enemy have a base. The enemy have, well, 30 tanks, which is double the size of normal, of course, and the map is a little bit larger as well. 1.4 times 1.4, meaning this is 1.96 kilometers squared. That's double the largest current map in World of Tanks. Whoever takes the enemy base first or destroys all of their tanks wins the game. That's a lot more simple than the 30 versus 30 front line that you might have seen on the channel 3 weeks ago. Now, there are some things that haven't changed, and actually, just before I talk about that, let me highlight that this sandbox test server is running the 9.18 version of the game, but bizarrely enough, this is running the 9.18 version 1 of the test server, which means that the light tanks currently are unnerfed. So they've got 390 alpha, they've got improved view range, they're frankly what I think they should have been, and they were an absolute joy to play in this game mode. And it's not just because that they're a little bit better than the tier 10 light tanks that are in the live version of 9.18, it's the fact that when the map is so much bigger, you feel like you can keep your opponents at the mid to long ranges that light tanks want to be. And that's not just for sniping, you get to make more use of your camo, you get to make more use of your view range, and you feel like you can be more useful to the team, and especially on a big wide open map like this that kind of feels like a Steps, a Prokhorovka, or even a Murovanka, with the kind of art style, I guess, of Serene Coast. I think it's a Serene Coast kind of art style. Now, one thing I'd love to highlight, well, I must highlight immediately, is that this map is currently in development. In fact, Wargaming have put signs up everywhere clearly stating map in development in yellow and black, as if it couldn't be more obvious. So everything that you're seeing here is subject to change. We may or may not even see this reach the live server in whatever form, but I thought it would be interesting content for you all to be able to check out and to see what the devs are thinking, and hopefully be able to provide your feedback on it so that then they can implement that if they ever do read any of the comments on my YouTube videos, which I think that maybe they'll occasionally do, or I'll try and amass it and forward it on your behalf. So initially, when I was playing on this sandbox test server, I was a little bit ill prepared. I didn't quite understand that when you do put double the tanks in the game and you haven't increased your hit points, the chances of you getting just absolutely eradicated is so much higher. But that also means that there's more damage that you can do, there's more kills that you can get. Are we going to be seeing some, I guess, 28 kill Rezenai Heroes medals on this map? Well, that would be something, wouldn't it? Well, that'd truly be some ridiculous kind of World of Tanks action possible here. But there are a few things that do feel a little bit frustrating. Of course, your ammunition doesn't increase, and so when there's so many tanks on the enemy team, some of the vehicles, such as the light tanks or the FV215B183, do feel a little bit limited because you don't really stand a chance if you miss a few shells, or if you've just had a really, really good game, being able to keep going towards the end. And you'll have to see how many rounds we've got left in the AMX-13-105 by the end of this. And as I did mention, this is with the increased alpha damage of this tank. So on the live server, this vehicle has 360, so you're going to be doing quite a significant amount less. Now, one thing I do like about this UI system is at the top we can see that there's light tanks, self-propelled guns, tank destroyers, mediums and heavies, so you can clearly look to see what kind of holes there might be in the enemy team. And we can see that all of their light tanks have died, whereas we have 2 light tanks remaining, but the enemy have still got quite a few tank destroyers that are most likely going to be skulking around in this kind of an area, so I've definitely got to be careful of that. Now, of course, with the fact that the spotting distance remains at 445, I just really felt like when I was playing the light tanks on these maps, it just felt so much more important. But right now, I'm about to go ham on this mouse that is in the open field, and he's got a Type 5 heavy as well. I put my first round into the middle of his vehicle and firing right underneath his turret, just praying that happens. Yeah, that was an ammo rack for 1,456 damage against that mouse. How absolutely ridiculous. We picked up, oh my word, how many hit points did we do to him there? That's 800, roughly about 2,300 damage to that poor mouse. And now I've gone out, I'm reloading, I'm going back in. Hopefully we can do the same thing to this Type 5 Heavy, but if he is using that big derpy gun on that tank, we certainly have to be careful here, because he will be able to roll for about 1,100 damage and pretty much remove most of my hit points wow, I'm a lucky dog. In fact, he doesn't roll very high. He rolls low and I survive. Even though he did 957 damage to me, and I put a full magazine, well, I put 2 shots into his tank and a little bit of extra spotting, we escape on 66 hit points. So all in all, this map, it feels like the engagements are mid to long range mostly, but you do have some opportunities for close range combat. I did find a few of the locations to be absolutely amazingly powerful. This location here, you can see behind there's like a horseshoe that you can hide in, and that allows you to shoot out over this area. It allows you to also engage people that are in this area. It is certainly very effective indeed. But one thing is striking about when you double the tanks on the enemy team, and that's the chances of you just getting absolutely eradicated in a short period of time are exceptionally high. It's bad enough getting shot by one FV215B183, right? But when there's going to be likely 2 on the enemy team, it becomes even more painful. And also, the maximum amount of artillery in this game mode have been doubled from the maximum 3 when there are 15 players on either side to now 6. And so if you're a heavy vehicle and you do get caught out in the open, then it can be quite frustrating. Now, talking about artillery, I am going to be going and hunting artillery myself. And one thing I'd like to highlight is that you might notice the map feels a little bit sparse right now. It's not covered in grass, it's not covered in trees. That is not because of my graphical settings, that's because, as I highlighted, this map is in development. Wargaming are making it so clear that that is the case, as you can see right out the spawn here. And I'm sure that they're going to either flesh this out with grass. I'm sure that they're also using this a bit of a test bed to see how big they can make the maps. Double the size, I guess, means double the pressure on the game engine, and also on players' computers. And I can imagine that the only thing keeping this all together right now is probably the 445 meters maximum spotting distance in the game. However, that was rather lovely that we took out the Batchat 15558 and now we're going after the Object 261. These new artilleries are certainly very blind indeed, and this guy doesn't spot me at 260 meters. And that's the last thing that he'll do as we do shut him down. He was prepared there, ready to get me as we come around the corner. And now with only 2 tanks left on the enemy team, I'm just hoping that maybe we can pick up a top gun. And here it is! There you go, right in the back of the STB-1. And now it's a case of just finding the lonely tanker, the T-124, who I quickly notice is behind me. Hopefully we can get a quick reload in, and with 7 shells left in the game, we sneak up behind the turreted American Tier 10 tank destroyer, put 1 into his back, and put 2 into his back. 7,500 damage nearly, and 3,500 spotting. That certainly isn't bad for a Tier 10 light. So before we take a look at the next round on another brand new map, let me just take you on a little tour of Sunny Valley. Of course, if this map does manage to make it into the game, because this is in development, there's no guarantees that this will even hit the live server. So this area towards the northwest very clearly is more built up than the rest of the map and will be dedicated to heavies, I guess, managing to get cover. Some more heavily armored frontal tank destroyers will want to make their way along here. And this reminds me very much of Lakeville, right? I kind of feel like I'm in that center pass going down the middle of the map, taking a look over towards the church. It's even aligned up in the same way. There's an opportunity to flank all the way along the north of the coast to get towards the enemy base, but I can imagine this is a very big open kill zone. Try and dig out tank destroyers or heavies in these locations, or alternatively, any self-propelled guns or tank destroyers that want to make their way up here are going to have an extra long range to be able to engage you. And that's where most of the tank destroyers have been sitting, both in this location and also on the other side of the map. Tank destroyers love to sit up here, and I've seen some incredible games for very sneaky tank destroyers, like of course the Swedish Stridsvagn 103B. I believe the middle of the map will be a playground for light tanks and medium tanks wanting to extend their view range, and does favor vehicles with some gun depression. I absolutely love this position here. This horseshoe just gives you cover from all around if you can make it here from the southwestern base, and this allows you to peer around the corner over here to make some engagements around here. There truly is just going to be an opportunity, I think, for every kind of vehicle, and I guess mediums and lights, and definitely not the slower heavies, are going to be wanting to go towards the southeast of the map. It's very wide, it's very open, there's lots of opportunities to use your mobility to try and flank and get improved locations. But of course there are still going to be some positions, like these buildings, that if you want to dig in with your heavier vehicles, that you might be able to slow down the medium medium advance, even take a few of them out. And so all in all, I did enjoy Sunny Valley. I thought it was a fresh breath of air, 30 versus 30 combat on a much bigger map than usual. Definitely did cater for the light to medium vehicles, but there were also still spaces for heavier vehicles to use as well, and tank destroyers sitting at the back sniping. There really was something for everyone on this map. But now let's move on to another one. This one is called Grand Canyon. So Grand Canyon is a little bit smaller than Sunny Valley. It is 1.2 by 1.2 kilometers, meaning that the total area of the map is 1.44 kilometers squared. And so that's pretty much 45% bigger, or 50% if you will. And so the fact that there are still 30 versus 30 tanks means that the combat is very much more densely packed. You're fitting in a larger number of vehicles in a smaller space, and so it would feel a bit more like an Ensk kind of style of map than it would be feeling your Prokhorovka or your Malinovka. And I'm going to be playing in my T100 LT, and I've managed to race into a position here where I thought that I could try and get some good view range. And yeah, we're going to be seeing that we have lit up pretty much most of the enemy team. Well, not most. You can't really see most of the enemy team anymore, considering there are 30 vehicles on the enemy team. But we are getting quite a few spots here. I think we've probably already lit up about maybe 8 or 9 tanks down this flank. And we can see that the spotting damage is already starting to come in. 2,000, just hoping that we get a few more rounds in. What is this 13105 doing sitting right there? Now, I don't want to fire at him because, of course, if I fire, I will get spotted myself, and this is far too juicy. Now, one thing that really is interesting about this map is the canyon that goes right down the middle. Yeah, it's got to be the characterizing feature. And so what you find is that the east is shooting across at the west, and the west is shooting across at the east. And this is what's happening here. I'm spotting from this location, and most of the spotting damage that I'm getting is actually coming from vehicles that have situated over on the west, shooting across at vehicles that are spotted in the open on the east. So I believe there's going to be a lot of crossfire on this map. That's one thing that we're going to be seeing. And oh dear, Mr. Gorilla, what was that? He just lost all of his health from a penetrating shell from a Conqueror gun carriage that also set him on fire. And in the first, I guess, less than 2 minutes of the game, I'm already up to 5,500 spotting. Now, Grand Canyon does have a few opportunities for not just sitting in a bush and spotting. One of the best things about this map that I found is just look at the height difference. This is so bizarre in World of Tanks. I still can't quite get over this. Just the fact that you can get so far above your opponents. I guess the only other map that we've really seen this happen in will be something like an Overlord, but this feels even higher than the cliffs of Overlord in Grand Canyon. I'm sure we're going to see some amazing cliff dives off here to be able to get your opponents. And this height difference is certainly there to be exploited, and so that's what I'm going to be doing in my T100 LT right now. Going to make my way up into this little, there's like a whole nother ridge line up here that you can be fighting around, and I'm sure that medium tanks and vehicles with a lot of gun depression will truly love this position up here. I still can't quite get over the opportunities to simply just get above your opponents and outflank them, and height is a real advantage when it comes to World of Tanks. You can hide most of your vehicle, only expose your turret. Can really put pressure and see the entirety of the enemy tank, and that TVP just manages to get back there before we would have finished him off. Now I'm going to try and go into the side of this Kranvang. Unfortunately, we weren't able to penetrate him. We'll be able to go through in our second round. Just want him to miss the shot. There you go, one right through there, and he's fired 2 with only 2 remaining. Now we can see our team is trying to push right up through the middle. I'm still worried about that TVP reloading, and there we go, we bounced 1 from him. This frontal armor on this tank is better on this sandbox test server than it is on the live server. I think it's got 90mm now rather than the 100mm that it will have on this sandbox test server. So definitely keep that in mind when you are taking a look at these 2 light tanks and thinking that they're incredible and you want to pick them up immediately. You might be a little bit disappointed. Much like the disappointment of that Kranvang that we managed to take him out. And I guess situations like this aren't really going to be super easy. I mean, I guess I'm the kind of player who's going to try and go to places and immediately think about what locations are going to be the strongest, and I really don't think that that bush that you saw me working at the beginning of the game is going to remain that powerful all that often. Or alternatively, I don't think that you're going to be able to go into this position and just have multiple enemy vehicles that you can put so many rounds in as I am here. But hell, while people are learning, I might as well try and take advantage of that. And that Batchat 15558 just knocked out 2 of my 3 crew members, and my med kit is on cooldown, meaning that the rest of my impact in this game is going to be frightfully awful, because I don't have a commander to spot, and even when I do manage to shoot at anything, I don't have a gunner to make that accurate at all. Nevertheless, hopefully we can get some revenge on the artillery. No, we can't. We're just going to have to make do with going after this griller at the end. And we've got 460 hit points. If he shoots us, he will be able to take us out. But luckily, he bounces off our armor, and he also somehow rolls his tank. Okay. Well, you know what? I think that's a fitting end to any game of World of Tanks, right? So 2,000 damage, 7,500 spotting in a game that wasn't even 7.5 minutes long. Not too bad. These tier 10 light tanks certainly feel a lot better on maps that are 50% or 100% bigger than the largest maps currently in World of Tanks. In conjunction with the fact that when there are double the tanks on your team, that means there's double the firepower to be spread around, and when there's double the tanks on the enemy team, that's twice the hit points that might be going into your spotting damage. And so all in all, I really enjoyed my time visiting the Grand Canyon, and this felt like such a novel map. Sure, it wasn't quite as big as Sunny Valley, but I feel like the fighting was just so much more intense. This map felt a lot like Mines meets Mountain Pass, and I just felt like it really worked. Just think of this location over here that you saw me using in my T100 LT. This is a lot like the central part of Mines, although there is another way that you can make it over if you can slip your way over these rocks to be able to get on and off it. But this area is just a tiny part of the much larger map. On Mines, this is the kind of the center that dominates it, and there's barely any space to move around. On this map, on Grand Canyon, this is just one of probably the 3 different Mines equivalent maps that there are to play around with. And I just loved the height disparity, the fact that you can go up and down. It wasn't all flat combat like you get in the regular form of World of Tanks. And I should also probably mention that this is an encounter map. This is not a standard battle where each team has a base, and so that means that the most intense fighting in theory should be in the middle of the map, but it should be quite easy to still be able to interrupt. Well, actually, I think this rocky outcrop will protect you from most of the part. And let's say that you were on the northern team and you came down here, then you should be able to force your opponents to have to come down to fight you, or alternatively to flank around. And I can imagine that a map like this would be able to work just with 15 versus 15 players. Sure, 30 versus 30 on a map that's 1.44 kilometers squared does feel rather compact, but I wonder if Wargaming have thought about just upsizing maps to this kind of a level in the 15 versus 15 game mode. And there's one thing that I absolutely love, and do let me know if you agree with me. New maps, it just feels like we've been done with the same stale city maps. We've seen Stalingrad, we've seen Kharkiv, we've seen Paris. They're all close quarter city maps, and it's been a breath of fresh air for me to be able to play on this sandbox test server, to test out 2 new open maps that I feel like heavies can still have a good performance on. I feel like all tank types exceed on these 2 maps. And it's not just a case of your brawling heavies or your brawling mediums that really do have the advantage, like we've been seeing recently in World of Tanks. So hats off to Wargaming. I had a lot of fun participating in the sandbox server and testing 30 versus 30 combat on 2 brand new maps. And I must finish the video by highlighting that this is in development, it's on the sandbox test server, and do expect it to be a hell of a lot more polished if we ever manage to see it hit the live. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a like. I'd really appreciate it. And don't forget to let me know in the comments what you think about this new 30 versus 30 combat. Do you think that it looks more interesting than the 15 versus 15 fights that we currently have? And what do you think about the maps? Do you think that they look too big? Do you think that they're suitable for the 30 versus 30? And do you think that perhaps this 1.2 by 1.2 kilometer squared map would kind of work in 15 versus 15 combat? And also, what do you think about specifically the height disparity on this map? Do you think it's going to be too advantageous to players who just simply want to sit up on the high ground? Or do you think that it looks like an interesting novelty that would add a little bit of variety to World of Tanks? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.